Perfect. All right. I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, January 14th, 2020. First of all, is there anyone here to speak to anything that is not on the agenda?
Yes, I got something I want to talk about.
Harry, please lay it on us.
I see in the paper that the herb is being sold. Is that true?
Yes, that's our understanding.
What I want to know is the people that are buying that, what do they have to go through as far as public meetings? Do they have to have a public meeting like everybody else does before they go into business? Do they have to come before us to let us know what they're doing as far as the parking, as far as their inside of the building and all that kind of thing, and how they're going to be selling this stuff, or what's happening with them?
The general understanding would be that the special permit is not conditioned upon ownership. So as long as they can comply with the floor plan that was approved, substantially in accordance with the floor plan, and then the conditions on that permit, then they can operate within that special permit.
So they have to do what we granted them.
Right.
Who's going to enforce that?
Typically, the conditions of a special permit are enforced by the building inspector. So I think, for example, there was, for the first 3 months, they have to operate by appointment only.
Right.
So they have to abide by that. And then they have an opening day plan that was approved, so that would have to be...
All right, so as long as they comply with what we approved, then they're okay, okay?
Correct.
All right. That's all I want to know.
All right. Moving right along, we have an A&R for Mountain View Investors. Mr. Sewell.
As a condition of the special permit for the co-op, we needed to have an A&R approved. We're heading toward closing by the end of the month. We need an A&R approved. This A&R would eliminate these internal lot lines and create one large parcel in accordance with your decision.
Are there enough frontage?
Yeah, I mean, we required it.
So please,
It's kind of hard to say no, but...
To endorse the A&R for Mountain View Investors, 228 North.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? All right. I will get to signing, and we can move on to the continued public hearing for Holistic Industries.
me again. Hi. So, when we left off in, I believe it was November, I think we had just a few major open issues. We had an issue about whether there would be a fence at the east side of the property. We had some issues with overflow parking and issues with signage. And so we have provided you with a number of documents, including proposed signs, signs that would, let me break signs down into two categories. Signs with regard to the parking are in one category, so the Liberty mural is another category, and I don't think we're ready to go forward on the Liberty mural yet. And the reason is that if you're going to require more parking, it's going to impact what we could do on the mural. That's like the bottom of the list of signs. And so, we'll consider filling in whatever signage we have left, if that's what they want to do, and we'll come back. Either if we know tonight what signs we're going to require, we're going to need another meeting because we don't have a provisional license yet. So we'll be back, and so we can deal with that at the next session. So I'd like to just find out, how we're doing on the signs we did submit, the parking signs. So,
Can I ask a question in your presentation? Is that okay?
Please, yeah. Sure.
I don't want to jump around too much in your presentation here, but you're starting off on, we've seen these materials on the signage. But one thing that I think I saw in here was that you met with the neighbors and had some discussion.
well, we sent a letter to the neighbors. David Coleman's here. He sent the letter if you want. I'm happy
Was
to
there
have
any
it.
back
I
and
don't
forth
really,
of any kind?
I did not hear anything back at all.
Yeah, I just wanted to see.
I don't really have an opening presentation. I just want to, introduce the issues that I see and let Mark, and if you have questions for David about the opening day plan. Let's start with, I know you have some revised plans.
Correct, that's
So
what's
maybe
submitted.
that would be a good place for Mark to start.
Great.
Sure.
Evening, Mark Reed from Heritage Surveys. So as we had talked about at the last meeting, maybe I'll stand here so I'm not. We have prepared this overall ortho parking plan so to give the board a better idea of Northampton Street, Florence Road, and Highland Avenue. The property is located here, and the building parking, and then the additional overflow parking that is located on Mr. Dion's property is also now shown with signage, not signage, directional arrows, and signage that would be put on the building that would say that Liberty do not enter signs. We have a note on the plan so that people that were in this overflow parking would exit up Northampton Street and discourage them from coming to Highland Avenue.
So the arrows on there are actually they are or will be painted?
They will be painted.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And then looking at the striped parking there, is around the sort of painted island, if you will, are those spots also dedicated to Liberty, or are those ones going to be staying for Dion?
And that's a further plan in here. The only spots that are dedicated to Liberty are these right here.
I can ask one of these, the spots on this side, our intent is to park employees there, so there's
Over
not
here?
as much flow no, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
That's right here, primarily, just so it reduces the flow and potentially any issues with Highland Avenue.
Okay.
Right.
At least that's our intent.
Correct.
Thinking that the people that are parked facing Northampton Street are more likely to go out.
Likely, plus
Northampton
also to see
Street.
the signage,
See the sign, okay.
and we'll have signage internal, but yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So this is the sign we're talking about here.
So, I think this is a good, also gives you a good idea of the amount of vegetation around the property that one of the abutters from Highland Avenue had concerns about somebody potentially coming over and walking over to Highland Avenue area from the site. Currently, the plans show that the fence along here would be installed. There was some discussion at the last board meeting with the wishes to have it extended all the way to the back. We don't feel it's really necessary based on the amount of topography. The site itself, been out there, drops about average 4 to 6 feet down in the lower grade in the back. So there is quite a difference in grade transition, and then some heavy woods that abut our property as well as Mr. Dion's property, kind of wrap around the residential houses along Highland Avenue.
Are there any natural paths in there?
No,
Deer paths?
they're not.
It's actually
No.
mostly swampy.
Yeah, there is a wetland in here that's why we went through Conservation Commission for a notice of intent. So this is a wetland through here. So it's pretty dense and overgrown. There's a lot of down old dead trees through here, so it's not something that's a nice, pleasant walking,
Not inviting.
inviting area.
I'm not sure where we'd be going either.
So
Last meeting that you had, that fence had an opening in it and a
Yes.
gravel
Right.
walkway between the two
Correct.
properties?
Yes, it does.
So it still has that?
Yeah,
so that
it
the
does.
Employees
Yep.
and possible,
Correct. Kind of hard in yellow, it shows up on a different
Yeah.
plan that we submitted to you. This gravel walkway is in,
okay.
coming from this overflow parking and employee parking, so that the gravel area can come to the front door.
Okay.
So that's in place now. I also have an as-built plan that we prepared, that we submitted to the Conservation Commission last night, that I emailed you, copied you on the emails on yesterday for a request for a certificate of compliance from the Conservation Commission. And I put a couple copies of the as-built, full-size copies of the as-built to give to you.
That's built of the building and the
Yep.
parking lot?
So we did an as-built of the building,
Yeah,
site proper,
proper, yeah.
shows these parking spaces and the walkway
It does, okay.
as an as-built.
So it's actually built already?
Yes,
Okay.
yep, it's in place. Also, another question was the amount of the increase in the stormwater runoff from the gravel, from changing from grass to gravel. So in our submission, we have drainage calculations. So it only slightly increases the runoff by 0.04 CFS, cubic feet per second. It's barely measurable for that. So going from a grass area to gravel is not a big impact of flow and drainage onto the site. It will stay on site, either in the pavement area or the grass area. So it's not going to discharge to Mr. Dion's property because the elevation is higher in grade than Mr. Dion's property. So it's all going to retain on site for that. Also, in an 8.5 by 11 and copies, I took pictures as part of your package and to better describe the change in grade. You look at some of the, for instance, you see the thick vegetation on the bottom first page. The next page really gets into some of the steep topography. It drops off from Mr. Dion's property in the back towards the houses on Highland Avenue. So it's, it's not an inviting spot, to take a stroll.
And I see in the last picture, and I think it's on the map too, there's a dumpster and some containers or something in some of those spots along there. Are those going to be free once this is done, or is that?
Those are Mr. Dion's.
Those are Mr. Dion's containers, and they're in the pictures.
Yeah.
So that's another barrier
Yeah.
along this line here.
So how many spots are you actually getting on the Dion site?
20 total.
20,
20 total?
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, he's gonna, my understanding is that those containers will stay where they are. That's where he moved them to allow us access for those for those spots. And his snow storage
Kind
area
of
is all
below.
back.
So along Northampton Street, there's 9,
Yeah.
and then 11 along here, and then the containers start
Okay.
on the 11th, and the 11th, and heads towards the back of the property. His containers, Mr. Dion's containers.
Can you detail for me on that map? You said you didn't think it was necessary to extend the fence all the way down where the fence is currently.
So it will be, the fence is not installed yet, but it's being proposed to be put here to the corner of the building.
Right, and so we're only talking about the additional maybe 4 spots on the other end.
Right. So if somebody decided to, come this way, they would have to walk all the way around to the front of the building because this is not an access point. This is where the enclosure is going to be for deliveries. So, this is a secondary egress and employee entrance. So the general customers need to come in the front door. So it would be foolish for somebody to
We'll have them on tape just in case.
run around. Yeah.
Okay, so you can see that on the third page of this picture, sort of where that first building ends.
Right. And you can, on the first page actually, the first page on the bottom is a picture of the site. I was standing right here, taking a picture this way. So you can see that at the corner of his pavement, there's more containers right up to the edge of the pavement now he's put there. This was an ortho photo that was, done last year, Google Earth. So he's got containers all the way up to the back.
Okay.
And then topography drops down.
Right.
So, he's got a natural wall
Yeah.
of storage containers there.
But your understanding is that all 20 spots will be cleared for
Yes.
opening day?
Oh, yeah.
And And if you go out there today, you can see the 20 spots that are cleared.
Oh, they are cleared as of today.
As of today,
Okay.
he's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that yellow striping is just striping on existing pavement. There's no raised berm or anything. It's
Correct. Correct. So what Mr. Dion did was, this Quonset building here is where he does car inspections. So he put this striping in, so somebody that wants to get a car inspected comes in here, wraps around here and drives in, gets his car inspected. They drive out to Highland and out to Northampton Street.
Okay.
That's the way he's run his inspection business for
Yeah.
umpteen years.
Okay.
So that's what this little striped hatched area is. It's not raised,
Okay.
it's just flush painted.
Right. But the
And then
signs
he's got additional parking over here for his employees and so forth.
Okay. But the sign, and the new signs that were proposed are on the building itself.
Correct, on the building itself, because
No to leave.
theoretically, one of the questions was if somebody, a customer comes here,
Yeah.
comes down here
Between
and
the two buildings, right?
decides to, GPS tells them to go down Highland,
And the sign.
there's a sign there.
Okay.
So we kind of updated the complete set of plans that we submitted to you. So each one of the sheets, we got an existing conditions plan. And I'll give you the as-built plan, site plan, showing the gravel area for the site itself. It's the only real change on this plan. This was the butters within 300 feet, and part of the requirement, showing names and location of the butters within 300 feet. Construction-related details, lighting plan, and a landscape plan. So everything's been done on the site, with the exception of, and I think today they were installing, the fencing
For delivery?
for delivery and around the dumpster enclosure. So if they didn't get it done today, by tomorrow or, the end of the week, it'll be all done. So that the as-built plan that we did had a notation on it that the enclosure for deliveries is getting installed today or tomorrow, as well as the enclosure around the dumpster. All the plantings are done and growing nicely. I spoke to the city engineer the other day. He's very pleased at how the stormwater system and rain garden is doing and functioning over, since it was getting installed last fall for the project in itself. So the last thing on the to-do list relative to the site is installing this fence pending final determination of the board.
And how long are those extra 20 spots rented for?
I have 3 months from when we open, plus an additional 3 one-month options. Mr. Dion seems fairly flexible. If it is a problem having more parking, then we will address it then.
Yeah.
He's been
And
user-friendly.
the sign, this banner is just it's just a vinyl banner with grommets?
He asked if we could make it removable if necessary at some point, just he did not want it permanently fixed, so
Okay.
to accommodate him. And there was an existing sign there, so I think using possibly an existing one if we can.
And then there's a proposal, this may not be you, Mark, but the sort of opening day plan with police details and stuff. Does that also include the Dion site too? Will there be police officers there that can help with that?
If they ask us to have them, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
What are you doing if I'm, the asked us to do?
Okay.
If I may, I met with Chief Alberti, actually after our last meeting here. He brought several of his staff members there. We actually did a walkthrough of the facility, provided them with a plan, the security plan for the entire facility. He made some recommendations, more kind of in-house stuff that he wanted to see if he could gain access to some of the exterior cameras. He asked about us putting a Knox box on the outside exterior of the building for them in the case of after-hours emergency. We did some walkthroughs of that area and around the building just to kind of see what's going on. He advised me that once we got closer to knowing when the opening day was going to be, he'd provide me with the template that he utilizes within his office to get the opening day plan. So whatever we needed to do, he'd provide us with an initial template. We'll get it filled out, submitted to him, and whatever he ultimately suggests over and above, we'll adhere to.
Any other questions from the planning board right now? Nope. Planning department?
Just along the lines of the opening day plan, I appreciate the effort, I think it's thorough, and I think as the discussion continues, whenever that is, I mean, in terms of the conditions that the board has put on the other dispensaries, we want to establish some period of time whereby you would open, and then there would be the opportunity for a review period. So just to, because this is still, you know, we may be experts, but we only have one operating dispensary in Easthampton. So it's still, you know, something where whether it's 60 days, at an interval of 60 days, there's an opportunity to potentially have the applicant come back to the planning board.
Sure.
And through that time, you would be working closely with the chief of police. So the opening with INSA worked really well. There was a lead up to the opening where there was a lot of coordination, and then there was just monitoring of how it was going. And I think if this idea of exiting the second property, you know, onto Northampton Street, you know, if there's symptoms that that's not working, you know, the first course of action would be the chief of police, but then at a certain interval, if the planning board needed to kind of adjust the plan, you know, that's how we tried to keep it so that you get approval with a, you know, an opening day plan that kind of operates for the first 60 days, and then once things are evened out, then you might update it, and then that'll be the plan that would go on forward.
Which I think benefits everyone, because the flip side, right, is you don't want parking attendants standing around if you don't need them.
Right.
You may be leasing spots you no longer need. So I think if we have a way to sort of say, okay, we need a little more here, but a little less here, I think that worked well with INSA, and it's sort of what we've proposed, or we put in the orders.
You're informing the entire process, not just here, but it's a good template to utilize, I think.
You mentioned 60 days, and I know before you were talking about a
3 month.
3 month
Yeah, so we should
plan.
have that before the 3 months is up, so if we know we need to go back and negotiate.
Extend that.
extension.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, I think the 60 days makes sense for that reason. Does that make sense to you folks?
Definitely.
You guys? Okay, I think that's a good concept.
Have a way to wordsmith that we've done before.
Yeah, and I think if you continue your discussion, take public comment, but I think because the planning board won't issue the permit tonight, you know, there might be an opportunity to draft conditions and findings that you would review before voting next.
What is the status with the CCC, to the extent anybody knows?
Having just, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No,
Having just looked at our application status, they have a nice big green pending sitting there. Our background checks are done, our fingerprinting is done, we are on standby. I don't know of anything that would hold us up. We're just...
Except for the CCC.
Right. I mean,
we're hoping to make this meeting for Thursday. It came out today, this morning with the agenda. Unfortunately, we weren't on it.
Okay.
So I don't see anything holding us up for February meeting, but I know if they might have another meeting as well, but hopefully sooner than later. But
Okay.
there's nothing that we have or we need to do or we need to fulfill that they're waiting on.
So, realizing that you guys probably want to have as narrow a window as possible from when you get CCC approval to when we review it, but also not wanting to come back for a meeting if you haven't seen the CCC yet, what's your best idea for timeline?
In terms of opening?
Yeah, well, in terms of coming back, because once you get CCC, you come to us.
When are their meetings?
Probably mid-February, I would say. They haven't posted their next public meeting. So it's the 16th. And the last one was also mid-month. I'm assuming it'd be mid-February. They post the agenda for 2 days prior. The process, you get a provisional inspections, final vote, final inspections, and then I believe it's an open for business with a 3-day prior notice. I mean, I want to get it done in 30 days. I don't expect it to get done in 30 days. The first inspections invariably can take some time. I'd say a month and a half.
Well, I mean, the question for you, I think, is when we'll get a provisional.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so, I mean, I think first of all, we want to take some public comment and hear tonight from the public. But just sort of looking forward, we need, before we can vote on it, we need a provisional.
Right.
The 5th is our next meeting, right?
Yeah,
And they're saying mid-February, so it'd be 2 weeks from that.
yeah, I mean, for discussion purposes, I would throw out the 18th. So the planning board would meet February 4th, and then again February 18th. Although
That might be the mid-February
Yeah.
CCC.
It seems like your meetings are always 2 days before the CCC meetings.
So maybe we're into our first March meeting. Okay, let's set this aside for now. Let's hear from the public first, and we can figure out where we go from there. Anybody here have any comments or questions regarding the project? Oh, wow. All right.
Let's get back to the CCC.
Through the ringer a few times. Can we talk about the signs real quick?
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
Is that okay, then?
Yeah, please.
I just want to know, this one that says, Liberty customers, please use the North Easthampton Street. Jeff, I haven't looked at our sign ordinance. Do you believe that that fits in all rules and regulations of our sign ordinance?
It's 2 feet back.
I mean, I think the way we typically do this is
Yeah.
that the special permit decision says you also have to comply with building code, which includes the sign ordinance. So you do need the building inspector to sign off on the sign. But
Easy peasy.
I mean, if that needs to be modified in sort of size or something like that.
Are these, I was trying to understand, are these A-frames? Is
These
that-
are the sandwich board A-frames, and the intent is when there is no snow on the ground, you put them up there to direct folks to where to go, essentially. Just so when they pull in, they can see it's to the left. Yeah, it's temporary.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from planning board or planning department?
Can I,
Yes, please.
on the sign issue, these A-frames, are we calculating those A-frames in when we're trying to figure out whether we're compliant with the sign requirements?
So I think there's an exception for temporary signage, right?
Yeah, my understanding is that a ground-mounted A-frame is gonna be not subject to the same calculations.
Okay.
Um,
The sign that's on Mr. Dion's wall, is that going to be our sign to be included in our calculation for 155?
Is it also temporary? I mean, that's
You could look at the like if it's yeah, you could look at. It
Actually-
depends on the duration of how long it's up, but I think technically adding the Liberty sign to the adjacent building would look at that calculation of that sign.
Of that building?
Yeah.
But that's replacing a potentially non-conforming sign that's already there.
Right.
So it can go there. I just want to know if we're getting, it's crediting, it's debiting against our sign.
I think it's by property and not, but
Okay,
there is,
that's-
but you should check with the building inspector on that, because
Okay.
he's the one who administers the sign
Okay, good.
ordinance.
And I
Alright.
definitely tend to favor Jesse's comment in it, and the sign is obviously a benefit to me. I don't think we should tackle it.
No, I mean, I think we approve of the concept. We think that a directional sign there is helpful. If the building inspector looks at it and says it really should be 78 inches instead of 84, then you got to comply with that. But
Okay.
I think the general concept of it, that sort of messaging and directional stuff is something that we would approve of.
sure, yeah, certainly.
So are we
and
postponing till March?
Not necessarily. So if we're going back to that, I was looking. We prepared the schedule for 2020, and for a little while I had some connotations where it was deviating. But so just for mainly the board members' purposes, there was a shift. The regular schedule would have potentially had you February 4th and then the 18th, but because that's President's Week, and I know many people are away. The meeting actually gets shifted to February 25th.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the potential appropriate target for this group. Yeah.
So can we get on the agenda and, like we did last time, if I need to continue it, I'll just send Jeff a letter and not have to show up because we don't have a provisional, there's no sense in coming in.
I think that's fine. I mean, usually we try to avoid that because you get people from the public who want to come out here. I think where we've had several meetings and where there isn't a large public participation, at least comments at this point, I think we can do that and have a final meeting there. We can have a draft decision to walk through.
Yeah.
And we can take public feedback at that point too. But I think at this point we've sort of addressed the bulk of our concerns for sort of how this will work.
Right.
Ready for me?
I am. Does that work for you folks?
For the 25th?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would probably sequence best, assuming we can get on the Feb
Yeah.
provisional in the CCD, but yes.
And do you have any
Thank
other
you.
questions? I know you were talking something about the other sign. Was there any discussions about
I just want to make sure there are no other signs that you think that we ought to be putting here.
Nothing more?
Okay.
I think it's good. I think the signage is going to be helpful. I think the ability to have parking attendants and police officers there as needed I don't think it's very logical for people, the way of the parking, to have them try to sneak across to Highland Ave. So I think most people, even if they tried it once, would realize they're still better off going out on Northampton Street, so I don't think that's gonna be a big issue.
It's fairly dense woods.
But I think the ability to correct people for the first 2, 3, 4, however long months that people sometimes do it will, nip that in the bud, so to speak.
Good thing.
I can't believe you resisted this one.
So a motion to continue the public hearing for all of the.
Sorry, I just want to air a question so that we can talk about it really quick. So, the question that you raised during the public speak time about ownership. So, with the other special permits that were granted, there was no ownership attachment to it. So it's really, I've tried to use the analogy before that you created the box in which this use is going to operate. The restrictions are going to be built in regardless of who owns or operates it. And I guess this is the chance to potentially talk through whether that's how you would like to approach these, continue to approach it that way, or
It's a great point.
So, we talked about
Tied
this
to-
at length when we drafted the equity bylaws, where I think the owner itself was a key party, and that was sort of the reason for sort of skipping the line, cutting some corners, that kind of thing. I think here, this is just me personally, I think that we create this plan and this system. I think these applicants have been great and forthcoming and comprehensive, but whoever comes in and does all of this, even if they sold it, is also going to have to get vetted by the CCC, so they're going to meet a sort of minimum standard at the state level.
Great.
I have less of a concern in that situation, where we're not giving a benefit to these specific applicants, and we're giving a license that complies with all the things that we presumably will condition in a final permit, but I'm open to discuss that if there's thoughts on the other side.
Well, my only concern is, and I'm just thinking about the verb as herb in the situation, is how do the new owners, well, first of all, are the new owners already, might they be INSA, and then does that mean that, are they now the single? I'm just trying to figure out, how does that impact the number of permits we have? Is that still a separate permit, or does it fall under INSA? As an example, I'm not saying it isn't, I have no idea.
There's still special, there's still
It's
separate
still its own
permits.
special
Yeah,
permit, so
yeah.
it doesn't affect our numbers. And
Right.
also, how do they know what the police are gonna require? Do they meet with the police first? How do they know what the opening day plan that has been approved?
They're gonna be obligated to do all that, so as soon, the same way that the applicant would be. So if we walk this out, right, and this applicant doesn't comply with the opening day plan, then conceivably we could make them comply with it or
Okay.
stop because they're not in
You're right, though, to my
compliance.
knowledge, there is no formal process of
Right.
them being educated
What's the
on.
communication? So, I
But
always
they
feel
still
like-
have to comply, like Jesse said. Sorry, Harry.
Yes, sir.
No, the only question I have is, it seems everything gets dumped on the building inspector. This guy hasn't got time to even look at a building, or might go down and check on something like this. How does he know exactly what's going on here between them, They
Zoning
don't
enforcement
involve
largely
everything.
works from complaints, right? So we hear from people that are the same people that would call the building inspector if someone wasn't complying. But the flip side of that is there's people that don't comply with zoning laws all the time, and their neighbors either don't know or don't care. And nobody's really sending out zoning enforcement officers doing street runs to check everybody.
Well, it just seems so funny. We have these countless meetings with Verb the Herb, and they got to come up here and they're going online, and we got involved with the police, and we're going to be parking off the street and everything else. Then all of a sudden, somebody else comes along and just skips all that.
Well, they can't skip
They
that.
still have to comply.
Well, indirectly they sort of skip it.
Well, the other mechanism that does exist is the host community agreement. So with the Bird Reserve, there was a discussion about the host community agreement and whether the entity still included that original person. So it was concluded that the original owner was still part of it, although some of the controlling,
Yeah.
I don't know, that's not my area of expertise, but anyway, the originator of the Bird Reserve was still involved enough that the host community agreement didn't need to be renegotiated. So that's a separate mechanism that the city has to ensure that the owners are going to be at least abiding by that type of agreement, and then the Cannabis Control Commission has their own change of ownership process where the information is exchanged through their process. So I mean,
Okay, so you won't-
Just in my experience, special permits generally run with the land.
They do.
They're attached to the property, they're not attached to a person. There are very limited circumstances in which a board can actually require this to be attached to a person and to terminate upon the person not being involved any longer. And as far as the building inspector, I don't know why anybody would want to be a building inspector. Because this is not, specific to this. All zoning enforcement by statute
Yeah.
is placed on the building inspector.
Yeah, this guy's gotta check all the signs out in the city and everything else. And
I get it, it's a big job, but, the chair is correct that this is all complaint driven, and so.
Boy, do you keep on doing something until somebody complains? I mean, that doesn't make
Well,
any
we
sense.
get people in here all the time, right, that say, why can't I do this? I know this person does it. And the answer is usually because their neighbors don't care and haven't called anybody.
As I recall, our equity plans were not approved or
Right.
voted here in Easthampton, is that correct?
And
And
that
that's
would have
really
been,
the one.
right, that would have been where ownership was really going to be
Right. That would-
critically important, because they were
Right.
going to get a special or distinct process.
And other than that, as you said, it's actually a slippery slope for us to get involved because, it's starting to tread on fairness.
Right.
Well, I just have the people come down and say, well, have a meeting, and have them come down and go, well, this is what we're planning on doing. We're planning on taking up exactly where the other guy left off, or something like that, just to get acquainted,
Well, they they don't have an option but that.
Yeah.
I mean, they
A
don't.
management plan, they used to, when it was sold, they used to make the new owner come in and tell the board that they will abide by the management plan or suggest changes to the management plan.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I think as long as it's not, so that was the fine line in Amherst, was that you don't want to make the permit expire because they lose some of the rights, but you could
Right.
make it a review meeting upon a change of ownership to at least introduce or update information or something.
What
At the
constitutes a
planning
change
board.
of ownership?
Well, that's
Well,
what
that's
it
what
is.
it is.
Partners.
I mean, there would be a mechanism whereby I would imagine that if there was a change in ownership that was reviewable by the Cannabis Control Commission, that's a formal process. There's an application form,
Yeah.
there's a fee. So if Holistic triggered something that required the Cannabis Control Commission kind of change of ownership process, then you could have a public meeting.
Right, so
or
if
at
the
least introduce-
CCC
right.
determines that there's been a change in ownership, then the new ownership shall come in within 30 days and, review the
Yeah.
management plan. I mean,
Is it review? What exactly are they doing when they come in?
So
They're notifying us of the change of leadership, which gives us sort of a forum to say, hey, you are supposed to apply to all this, and
Yeah.
that's it. There's really no teeth to it. It's
correct.
just
It's more of an informational exchange rather than, it doesn't give you the authority to go and all of a sudden, require 30 parking
Right.
spaces. So
I
you don't get to reopen the
Yeah.
hearing process, but you would have
Nothing's
information.
changed.
but
I think that's a good idea.
the teeth
I
to
like
it,
that
the
idea.
teeth to it too, Jim, is a reminder that, you have to do A, B, and C to continue to operate under the special permit, and we're watching.
I would
Yeah,
want
yeah,
teeth in it. It doesn't
On
no
notice.
teeth. Don't
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for someone to come before you and say, I recognize the conditions that you're
Yeah.
Right.
proposing, I'm going to abide by them, or I've read the conditions, here's a proposed change for you.
Yeah.
And then you have to decide whether this is
It's
a substantial enough
Yeah.
change to hold the public hearing or
Yeah.
not.
All right, I like that.
Does
Yeah.
that?
I think that's great.
What's really interesting in that is that it's not normally, in order to do that kind of thing, you have to go and pay your fee and get your permit and go through a review process. So it's kind of an ability to get in front of us on the prepaid,
Yeah.
permitting process that's
But
continued.
it's not a hearing, so you're
It
not going
really
through the-
isn't, but
Right.
there'll be a
It's
discussion
part
for
of the
sure.
meeting.
But it's
You're
just
here.
like the meetings we have all the time where someone comes seeking a modification that is not material, right? Whether we can administratively allow it or whether we need to do a public hearing.
Absolutely.
All right.
I'm comfortable
Sounds
with
like
that.
an A&R type of thing.
Let's put some language in there, we can discuss that at the next meeting.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, Mr. Zarvis, you have a
I
motion.
motion to continue the public hearing for Holistic Industries seeking a special permit till February 25th at 6 p.m.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. You want
Can I
these?
take that?
Yes.
Oh, Jesse, that's terrible.
Matters. Enforceable.
Today's the first day I'm back from it. We got more meetings business, but we gotta continue. I'll tell you.
I don't know how many you need. I'd like to take two.
Back.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll take two.
Are you all set, sir?
Sorry. Yours is painless. He says as he walks out the door.
All right, ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
I'll be acting chair for the remainder of the meeting. Jesse's recusing himself from our next two items of business. One, really, Division Street. We're still having a meeting. Thank you. We have Division Street. The planning board's supposed to review the layout and deed to make recommendations to the city council on acceptance. And the Division Street extension is a public way. Is there someone here to speak to that? Gotta recognize you. Hello. So, what you got for us today?
Essentially, we have provided to the city, do you want us to come up or can you do it from here? Would you?
Come up, please do.
Sorry, what's your name? I'm attorney Amanda Kemp. So I had submitted to the city clerk, we're looking to have accepted a small portion of Division Street that is currently private, had previously, I believe, been public and was discontinued. And so we've divided the parcel and are looking to have the remaining street accepted.
So my understanding is that we talked about this extensively before. We approved a component of it. It went from us to the various process, the city council, they sent it to the lawyer, now they're sending it back to us for our opinion, right? Is that right? And we send it back to them for final approval?
Correct.
Have there been any changes since the version we sent out?
To the plan, there's been no changes to the plan. So I drafted a deed based off the plan that was approved and recorded. And city council has reviewed it. They requested no changes to the deed. They did ask me for like 5 additional words to the easement. And we talked about a separate document for the discontinuance of the current easement that exists, which Mark Tanner, who I've been dealing with, has told me he's going to review and get back to me. We may keep it as one document, but they didn't make any changes to the deed itself.
From the materials that I've seen, from what you've presented, I see no reason not to continue along our original thought process and recommend to the city council that this be a public way. Do you have any questions you want to see asked, Jeff?
Just for the purpose of the record, so the planning board did get a letter from the city engineer. And
I read it.
yep, I just want to see if you have the date handy of that
You want me to
letter.
read it into the record? Do you have a copy?
Yeah, files. Would you? I think that'd be great, actually. I can find it.
If, look through
I
materials,
gave it to Jesse.
and he left with it.
Did you see?
I didn't print it, I read it.
Yeah, I read it too.
Okay.
I
think
could just note that we received
Yes,
a
I
letter
think it's,
from...
yep, because the city engineer did the inspection of the road and determined that the road was, small road portion, if you can call it a road, section was built according to the plan. There was a stormwater detention basin, catch basin installed, and he determined that it was done satisfactorily. And I think the only thing is, based on what Ms. Kemp said, that you would be recommending city council accept the public way subject to the final easement language being
The final approval by city.
final approval.
Yeah,
Okay, so you and the city attorney would have to figure out the final form of the easement prior to going to full city council?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a condition in there on our recommendation, because we're not voting anything, we're making a recommendation.
Correct. Yep.
Or maybe we're voting to recommend.
Yes. You are voting to recommend that city council accept it as a public way.
With the condition, on the condition that the city council accept the easements. Did I say that correctly?
It's the release of the current easement. That is the only, whether it's going to be a separate document or part of the easement that I had drafted and submitted. It had included language that specifically said releasing the prior easement as set forth on a certain plan book and page.
A lot of words in there. Try to get it down to 4 or 5. Okay, you got it.
So I move that we recommend that city council accept the public way subject to final agreed upon language regarding the release of the current easements.
One more time.
Alright, I move that we recommend to the city council that they accept the public way subject to final agreed upon language regarding the release of the current easement.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Now,
Is there any public discussion?
yeah, I'm gonna pause in our discussion at this point to see if anyone has any comments they wanna make, which I should have asked before. No, I've done. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Obviously, there's no against or abstentions, so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Everything goes well for you guys, okay? It looks like Soltage is not coming before us tonight as the last item on our agenda here. Do we know if they're coming to review the financial surety at a later date, or what's the deal?
They asked to not, they basically said that they weren't ready to present the information tonight. By email. Yeah, I would propose that there's no other business for the planning board at the next scheduled meeting, which is January 21st, so that meeting can get canceled, and then the next regular scheduled meeting would be February 5th, so.
So we move it to February 5th, first item?
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
Any announcements from anyone on the board? And then I'm looking for my favorite motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone.